Welcome to Conversations with Brent. Today, we have one of Cincinnati's finest, Mr. Sid Kennedy. What's going on, Sid?
Oh, everything is great. Good to be here, and thank you for inviting me so much.
Hey, man, it's a pleasure. I want to start out with something very important. You partook in an event this past weekend. Tell us about that event.
That event was entitled the Martin Luther King Salute to Greatness Gala slash Beloved Community Awards. And that is a gala that I have attended for the last 25 years.
Okay.
And basically, it entails a tribute to Dr. King's legacy, his nonviolent efforts to bring world and global peace. And his wife, Mrs. Coretta Scott King, opened the Martin Luther King Center for Nonviolent Social Change. And the King Center, its mission is to provide all types of humanitarian resources
Right.
through service to the community, global awareness of just peace and nonviolence, conflict resolution that they try to enact community and worldwide.
That sounds awesome. So, what all takes place at the event? Is it like dinner? Do they have speakers? Do they have civic engagement? What all takes place there?
They have dinner, it's a gala, and they have honorees who are in the fight for Dr. King's philosophies and his teachings. The past honorees have been Quincy Jones, Muhammad Ali, Bono, Truett Cathy from the Chick-fil-A Foundation,
Right.
the Fannie Mae Foundation, Victoria Helm Wilmot, Kennedy. There's been, several, prominent honorees throughout the years, that they have had the dinner. It's also attended by the civil rights luminaries, the Reverend Dr. Joseph and Evelyn Lowry, may they both rest in peace, Ambassador Andrew Young,
Okay.
the rest of the King family as well. Dr. Christine King Ferris, who is Dr. King's sister, who's still hanging in there at 95 years old.
Wow.
One of the last living matriarchs of the civil rights movement.
Okay.
And just a lot of corporations, Mercedes-Benz and the Ariel Investment Corporation, who were one of the honorees this year, all united and joined in keeping the dream alive, Dr. King's dream alive.
And how can people be a part of this? Is there a way they can contribute? Is there something they can do to help further the message? Because when we hear about what DeSantis is doing in Florida and all these things, it seems like we're almost going backwards instead of forwards. So what can people do to be involved, whether with the King Center or just in general?
Well, the way that you can get involved is by contacting the King Center, thekingcenter.org, or, going to the Martin Luther King Center for Nonviolent Social Change, which is downtown on Auburn Avenue. And I would be most, appreciative of, your donations, which I'm sure that you could use as tax write-offs or be tax deductible or what have you. But that's, something that the King Center, would give you more insight on. But, as far as, attending the galas, tickets are always there for purchase.
Okay.
And corporations, buy tables of 10, individuals buy tables. And it is a event that I look forward to covering every January. I used to cover it for HBO some years ago, but HBO has a shift in management, and which is one of the reasons they have eliminated boxing. They're going to a new era of streaming and other platforms and other demographic programming. And so with things like the Martin Luther King Center, Salute to Greatness, Beloved Community Awards, the Trumpet Awards, 100 Black Men. They kind of eliminated that.
Okay.
So mainly what I'm doing is I am doing the coverage and I'm submitting the footage and the interviews to outlets such as Showtime, the radio stations, and even this talk show here, So that's what I'm doing more on a freelance journalism basis, I should say.
Okay.
And, the King Center is an excellent gala. Their approach now, I think, is to draw a more urban demographic,
Right.
more younger people, because before the pandemic, they have concerts, which is what they call the afterglow reception. And, before that, it was just, nice music and talking and mixing and mingling.
Right.
But now they have concerts. Before the pandemic, they had an old school rap and hip hop concert with Curtis Blow, Dougie Fresh, and Kool Moe Dee. And then the next year, they had Cameo. And then the pandemic hit, So
Right.
now that things are just opening back up, Saturday night, Stephanie Mills did the entertainment. And I think that is the direction that they're trying to go into to attract a more young urban crowd, because the older civil rights hierarchy, the Reverend Dr. Joseph Lowry's, the Reverend Ralph Abernathy's, the Reverend James Oranges, the Reverend James Bevels, they have all passed on.
Right.
So, Ambassador Andrew Young, they are just, holding on. They're still with us, but I think what the King Center is trying to do is attract a more younger crop, of people like myself,
Right.
to keep Dr. King's dream alive and get the message out, and to educate and empower the younger generation of the civil rights legacy, the civil rights movement, knowledge of the struggles, of the civil rights advocates, not just Dr. King, but the other unsung heroes,
Right.
Ambassador Andrew Young, Reverend Dr. Joseph Lowry, Reverend James Orange, Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth, our homeboy.
Cincinnati, yeah.
Yeah. Understanding, all of their inputs and fights and the things that they went through, the inputs and fights for the civil rights movements, the house bombings, the crosses burned on the yards,
Right.
and all these things. And I tell people, even the younger people and some of the older people who have just migrated to Atlanta, who have no earthly idea of the civil rights movement, and what Atlanta, has positioned itself as not only the Black Mecca, but the birth of the civil rights movement, with the emergence and the teachings and philosophies of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his leadership. Like, for example, I tell stories that, were told to me because, of course, I'm not old enough, or I wasn't even born, before Atlanta became the ATL.
Right.
So there were times when, I, have studied this and read this in certain biographies and books on Dr. King, and talked to people, who are in their 80s and their 90s, that, relay stories to me, like there was a time when African Americans and people of color could not go shopping downtown at 5 Points.
Right.
If you went into some of them stores like Macy's and some of those other stores down by the 5 Points MARTA station, if you did go into those stores, you went in through the back way. Right. To try on shoes and try on clothes. There were times when, you walk past a white police officer, and you don't, take your hat off, and he'd slap it right off of you. You know, like, boy, take your hat off when you see a white man coming up the street.
Right.
And this is downtown on Peachtree, you know.
Wow. And so I want to make sure we touch this before we end this portion, but this is the program from the beloved Community Awards. It's held every year around Martin Luther King's birthday, correct?
Correct. Every year, the second Saturday rather, in January. And like I, was saying before, the gala just, reinforces, Dr. King's dream,
Right.
and people would not believe the atrocities that African Americans faced years ago, trying not to switch gears or anything like that. But I just want to, say this because it's very important, that the newly migrants to Atlanta and the younger generation know and understand, how there was a time when we were not allowed to shop downtown at 5 Points.
Oh, definitely.
The richest, it's the federal government building now, but years ago it used to be the richest department store. And I felt privileged years ago before they closed it to be able to sit down at that lunch counter and eat, because in 1960 Dr. King went to jail trying to desegregate Rich's department store. And it just, disturbs me to see so many of our people hanging out on that corner selling drugs and, not remembering or not knowing the sacrifices that someone paid for us to be able to eat there. And eat there and shop there. We were not allowed. That was unheard of, us going to Lenox Mall, shopping at Buckhead, buying homes in College Park here, and Marietta, Powder Springs, Kennesaw, Stone Mountain, Decatur, Alpharetta, Roswell. We were not allowed, to partake of those things, and it's like, Reverend Jose Williams in the early 1960s when he came, to Decatur, and at that time, Decatur in DeKalb County was less than 2% black.
Right.
And, back then, the white neighbors, like, boy, what you doing out here? And one incident comes to mind when Reverend Martin Luther King Sr., who was affectionately known as Daddy King in the civil rights community, Daddy King had Dr. King, Martin Jr. in his car with him.
Right.
And they were going out in Decatur, and they were pulled over by the DeKalb County Police. And the officer walks over to the car and tells Daddy King, boy, let me see your driver's license. Daddy King pointed to Dr. King, that's a boy. I'm a man.
I know that's right.
So you see all these things that, those before us has came through and went through, to establish Atlanta as a freedom center for African Americans and for the fight and quest for civil rights. And I think that, these are things that the younger generation need to know and understand, that Atlanta was not always the ATL,
right.
The Lenox Mall shopping and that buying homes in Stone Mountain and what. No. Understand and know our history. And when we know our history, we can do better. Right. And same thing with the west side of Atlanta,
So I want to make sure that because we can go into that, but I wanted to make sure that we stayed on this because I know it's very important to you. And then we'll get into some stories, but I want to keep the focus on your beloved because I know that's very important to you. I know the stories are important to that movement, but let's close out with one thing on this. We'll do a whole nother interview, man, and I'd love to hear the stories because, my dad was one of the first to start the NAACP in Maysville, Kentucky. So we got a lot we can talk about, but I know this is very important, and I want to make sure people stay focused on this, and then we're going to give you the history and the stories of why this is so important. So anything else you want to say about the gala before we close out on this segment?
Well, I encourage all, African Americans who are of financial, who have the financial means, to attend galas like the Martin Luther King Salute to Greatness, the 100 Black Men Gala, the NAACP Freedom Fund Dinner, even the Mayor's Ball, whereas this year, United Negro College Fund raised over $2 million to support HBCUs. The reason I say these things is because Atlanta, on the flip side of its positivity, is a lot more congested, than it has been in recent years. And networking is very, very important because it's who you know and who know you.
Yes.
Here in Atlanta. And when you go to things like the Beloved Community Awards, you are among people from all genres and all walks of life. From the common man to the president of Mercedes-Benz Corporation, all different celebrities. This year we had Deborah Cox, performances by her, Tisha Campbell, Malcolm Jamal Warner was the MC this year.
Okay.
And the King family, where they can just give you a whole kaleidoscope of the civil rights movement. And that's a good place when you run into and when you are interactive with all these different people from, all different, workforces and, genres and career avenues. That's a good opportunity, for you to, do your networking and know what you should be doing, in order to get to the pinnacle of success of what you're trying to accomplish and do.
Right.
So those are, those type of galas. This one here in particular is one of the reasons why, I have continually, gone to over the past 20 years and privileged to be allowed to cover, the gala and everything, and plus, get my network on and enjoy, myself with the rest of the brethren there and the civil rights community. And, I encourage, anybody, everybody to make the Beloved Community Awards your annual event.
Right. So you heard it, the Beloved Community Awards. Go check it out. Buy your tickets for 2024 and let them know that Sid Kennedy recommended it to you. We want to thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Brent, talking about the Beloved Community Awards in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King. See you next time.